Good evening, everyone. I'm Eric Landskroner, and welcome to Ask the Candidate here on News 12 New Jersey. This is a Vote 2025 special. We are welcoming today into the studio Democratic Congresswoman Mikie Sherrill. For the next hour, you are going to get the chance to speak one-on-one with the Congresswoman. Thank you so much for being here. It's good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so we want to let everybody at home who hasn't watched our Ask Governor Murphy show before know how they can get in touch. Of course, there are numerous ways that you can do just that. You can call us at 888-NEWS12NJ. That's 888-639-7126. You can also post a question to our Facebook, X, or Instagram accounts. And I can tell you, we've already had hundreds and hundreds of questions already. So before we get to the actual conversation here today, I also want to let everybody know that just the way we are speaking with the Congresswoman tonight, we are going to be speaking with her opponent, Republican Jack Ciattarelli. That will be a week from tonight, 8 o'clock, October 16th, right here in the studio. So you get your chance to ask both the Congresswoman as well as Jack Ciattarelli your questions. All right, and with that being said, let's get to our first question, Congresswoman. Again, thank you so much for being here. People have so many questions, especially on the heels of a lot of the news that's come out over the past couple of weeks. So let's get to this first one. This is from Danielle, 6877. So that's her handle. Wants to know why you couldn't walk with your military class. Of course, as I said, a lot of news over the past couple of weeks where you actually admitted that you weren't allowed to walk in your Naval Academy commencement and graduation. So why?
Yeah, so I come from a very accountable place, and I didn't turn my classmates in and I didn't get to walk. But I was commissioned an officer in the United States Navy. I graduated from the Naval Academy and went on to serve for almost 10 years. I served as a helicopter pilot and a Russian policy officer. I was a flag aide for the Deputy U.S. Atlantic Fleet during the USS Cole bombing and during 9/11, where I received some medals and commendations, and continued my service and received the highest levels of security clearance. And what's become really alarming to me in this recent process is the fact that my military records, my unredacted service records, were released to someone on the Jack Ciattarelli campaign. So he had asked for those records the day before the primary, and then was told no, that they were private military data and he'd have to have a social security number, signature. And yet he went back 2 days later and spoke to somebody at the archives who then, a technician who didn't have my social security number, used it to go into a VA database to pull out my social, or went in because he had access, went into the VA database, pulled out my social security number, pulled down all my records, no signature, which they were required to have, turned that over to the member of Jack Ciattarelli's campaign. So there are a lot of questions.
This is a very different account from what the Ciattarelli campaign is saying and from what the National Archives team has said as well. They said that this was a completely proper FOIA request and that, that it was a mistake by one of their employees. So you're saying that that's not the case?
No, there's an ongoing investigation. Bipartisan members of the House of Representatives have called for an oversight investigation to further understand how veterans' documents were released. We have spoken to people who've previously worked in the archives. There's a huge backlog for data. So first of all, the fact that my records were released so quickly when there's a 6-month, 12-month backlog is suspicious in and of itself. But the person that was releasing the data should have requested a social security number. They didn't get that. They had to pull that from the VA database. They should have had a signature from me. They didn't have that. They should have then notified the Navy that they'd released these records. They didn't do that. And the person on Jack Ciattarelli's team who received these records and who saw that my unredacted social security number was on it, that my 80-year-old parents' address was on it, when he saw that, he said he was shocked and disgusted. And yet that didn't stop him from turning those records over. And I think what's really alarming in this time period, given that the Trump administration illegally turned those records over, is that there is this mishandling of data throughout the Trump administration. So I have a lot of seniors who come up to me regularly, say, I'm so worried about my social security data. And then I've spoken to other governors who've said, that the Trump administration has called on them to release voter records with social security numbers and driver's license numbers. And some Republican governors have. Democratic governors have said no. But the fact that Jack Ciattarelli's already mishandled private data like this on his campaign, I think is really concerning.
You know, the Ciattarelli camp has been adamant that this is a big misdirect on your part because you're trying to divert attention from the largest cheating scandal in naval history and what your role, if there was a role, other than not turning in your classmates, was or was not. So I want to talk about this for a second because they've called on you to release your disciplinary records. But perhaps even more importantly now, it's not just them. Nearly 4 dozen Republican lawmakers in the New Jersey Senate and the New Jersey Assembly have done the same. They released a statement saying in part, quote, Congresswoman Sherrill owes the people of our state full and total transparency on this matter. The public has a right to know exactly what Congresswoman Sherrill said to naval investigators at the time, what violations she committed, and the full extent of her punishment. So will you authorize the release of those records if as you say, you're not being allowed to walk was strictly and only because you did not turn in classmates, then what have you got to lose here? What is there something to hide?
Well, I think these are my classmates' records. These are records that are being held, and I'm not going to have Jack Ciattarelli, who's already mishandled veterans' records, go on a witch hunt and rampage through my classmates' records. I'm committed to actually protecting private information here and people's records. I've committed to all the veterans across our state who've come up to me to say this. But I think what the people of New Jersey know is that I graduated. I was commissioned with my classmates. I served for almost 10 years. I held the highest level of security clearance. So I think the people of New Jersey know the trust that the Navy's placed in me. And I think that's why they know, you know, it's an accountable place when you don't turn in your classmates, you don't walk at graduation. But to then be commissioned an officer in the United States Navy, I think is something that people realize comes from the fact that the Navy felt they had trust and faith in me and my ability to do that job.
If it is a witch hunt, though, as you say, and there's nothing to hide at all here, why not authorize a release and show everybody?
This, again, authorizes, you know, would authorize potentially, I'm not even quite sure what he wants, information on my classmates throughout, you know, that is held on a lot of their private data. And I don't think the response...
From what I can tell, it sounds like they want to hear what you said directly to the investigators.
I don't think they know what they want to hear. I think they're on a witch hunt. I've told them what happened, and I think what they want to do is direct attention away from the fact that there's an ongoing federal investigation into how these records were released, that bipartisan members of Congress
want to know. They do say that these particular records, though, have nothing to do with your time at the Academy, that the records that were released started post-Academy.
I don't know what they have because they haven't turned them back into me, quite frankly. So they have been legally requested to return the documents that the Trump administration illegally released, and I think they should do that. And I also think that they should fully disclose exactly how they got those records. And at this time, Jack Ciattarelli is acting as if he doesn't know what happened on his own campaign. And I said to him, you know, look, either you're incompetent because you can't manage your own campaign, or you're really lacking of integrity.
We have a call right now. This is Robert from Marlboro who's on the line. Robert, thanks for calling in. What's your question?
Congresswoman Sherrill, I've read your outstanding position on transportation, and I wonder whether you agree that an inspector general would be helpful for New Jersey Transit.
I certainly always like oversight into how our systems are running, because often an inspector general can go into the systems and tell you whether or not people are working as well as they should be on those things, or whether or not the systems in place are actually working for the people. So I certainly think that's interesting. As you know, I think what is most needed right now is a dedicated source of funding to our transit. And it sounds like you've read the plan, so you're probably aware of that. And second of all, right now, the biggest threat to transportation in our state is the fact that President Trump has said he is going to freeze the Gateway Tunnel funds. This is the largest program of national significance. This is the most amount of money that the federal government's ever spent on a project. It's those Hudson River tunnels. It will be responsible for employing almost 100,000 people in the region. 200,000 commuters take that rail tunnel every single day, and Trump is imperiling that, even though Congress appropriated that money to New Jersey. But I'll continue to work to have a dedicated source of funding through transit-oriented development, through advertising on buses and on trains, as well as ensuring that we are utilizing the property that our transit systems owe to have money come into the transit system, so we're not constantly going to taxes or to higher fares.
We actually want to talk more about New Jersey Transit, but we do have to take a very quick break. Stick around. I know you're not going anywhere. We've got plenty more time to ask questions to Congresswoman Mikie Sherrill here on News 12's Ask the Candidate. Welcome back to Ask the Candidate here on News 12 New Jersey. I'm Eric Lanskerner along with Congresswoman Mikie Sherrill. You have your chance over the course of the next hour, what's left of it, to ask your questions to the Congresswoman. We have a question right now continuing along the NJ Transit line of questioning and thought here. Adam posted on X saying, NJ Transit raised fares without public hearings this year and has no plans to hold them before future annual increases. As governor, would you stop further efforts to increase fares without public hearings? Would you push for a virtual hearing option as well to encourage participation?
So I really think having participation is so important, and I'd love to have hearings and would be interested in virtual hearings. What I'd really like to do is get away from constant fare increases and constant tax hikes to pay for our transit. That's why I'm so focused on how around the world they pay for transit. And it's transit-oriented development. It's utilizing the land that NJ Transit owns to do things like put in parking lots to get money into the system from the parking lots, for example. And also having advertising on the trains and buses. Because as it is now, we're just not keeping up our transit lines, and then we have summers of hell, and then we have issues with not building new transit system where we need new stuff for our new neighborhoods, for example. But we also have to get more money from the Port Authority as well, because unfortunately too much of that goes to New York. And they often complain about the PATH system, but right now they're not even appropriately maintaining the PATH system because we're seeing those fires under the tunnels. So with all of that at stake, I think that's why I would like to move away from this sort of keep raising fares, instead have a dedicated source of funding. But the really big killer would be this freezing of the Gateway Tunnel funds. Once that money runs out of the Gateway Development Corporation, that's $1 million a day. And that's only at the start. Once some of the lawsuits start for delayed work, that cost goes up daily. So, you know, we need to make sure we are getting that money to work right away. And as governor, I'd take Trump to court right away to push that money back in.
All right, Congresswoman, let's get back to the phones right now. We have a call from Nancy in Hazlet. Nancy, thanks for calling in. What's your question?
Hi, my question is if they're going to do something with the electric bills, I know that it was mentioned that there'll be like a state of emergency, or how are we going to handle that? Are we going to have it where they lower our bills and then we have to pay it later on? Or is it a reserve that we have to put back in that they would be raising the cost then?
Mm-hmm. So on day one, I'm going to declare a state of emergency on electricity costs, Nancy, freezing rate hikes. Because as I'm sure you've seen, so many people have kicked the can down the road, and now the extra costs have been dumped on families in New Jersey. I've already heard from some of the utility companies who've written an open letter saying they're willing to renegotiate these prices with me should I be governor. And then we also have some money that comes through the BPU from Reggie and other areas that we can use to also defray the cost. So there won't be a balloon payment, if you will, at the end of it. In the meantime, I'm going to drive a bunch of energy into the grid through solar, battery storage, refurbishing and modernizing our gas power infrastructure. That's about 40% of the grid. In the long term, building a new nuclear facility on the 4th site down in Salem, and continuing to modernize our electric system so we can put more and more power into it. Right now, the market has been incredibly screwed up by PJM, so everything we produce here in New Jersey will drive down our costs. The more we buy on the market, the more our costs will go up.
So, as a follow-up question here, Tom posted on X, he wants to know if declaring a state of emergency can lower energy costs, why hasn't any other governor, including the current Democrat, Phil Murphy, in office, used this?
You know, I think We have people who've not been thinking outside the box right now. And so we've seen cans kicked down the road, and I've been really frustrated by that, because if you trace what happened, you see, you know, PJM and BPU and FERC and JCP&L and PSE&G and ACE, I mean, this alphabet soup of agencies who all had some sense that this was coming, and yet it just sort of, once it came, they just dumped all the cost on the New Jersey ratepayer. And we've seen some of our utility companies have $1 billion of profits. And so I think it's a willingness to take on some pretty powerful interest in the state and to say, no, we're not going to keep dumping this on people. We're actually going to take on the companies that should be adding more power into the grid, take on PJM. I'll join with the governors across the region, a bipartisan group of governors who are holding PJM accountable right now and saying, no, we're going to demand that we put people on the board so that we can drive down these costs.
Governor Murphy has said he's not sure how you actually do what you want to do here. Freezing rates, declaring the state of emergency, and there have been numerous articles actually questioning the legality of what you want to do. Can you explain that?
You know, we talked last time because I think Governor Murphy had, last time I was on your show, just said he wasn't sure I was going to do it. And I walked through, I was kind of glad he brought it up because I walked through exactly how we were going to do it. And we have members of the legislature who are very interested in this, who've endorsed the bill. People like Senators Vingopal and Berzacelli has endorsed it. Katz, Zwicker, I'm trying to think of the list, but quite a few have come on board. And these are often some of our most innovative members of the Senate and Assembly who want to look at new ways of doing business and don't accept the status quo as the answer.
Congresswoman, we have to take another quick break. We're going to have more of your questions when we come back to Ask the Candidate here on News 12 New Jersey.
Hi, Mikey. My name is Jay. My question for you deals with education. And just being honest, I haven't really heard or seen much coming from your campaign when it comes to public education in our great state. I guess the biggest question coming to my mind is the school funding formula. And I hope you saw it. The fact that, you know, we had some districts contemplate bankruptcy. We've had districts sell school buses and even schools. We've had football teams cut. We've had Special Olympics dropped. We even had tons of personnel also cut due to the cuts in the school funding formula. So my question for you is, how do you feel about the funding formula? Is this something you're going to keep? Is this something you want to change? Any input would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Great question. You know, what I've been talking about with the school funding formula is that we need to modernize and stabilize it. And by that, I mean the formula hasn't been reworked in years. So we have to make sure that we're accounting for some students with disabilities because different districts have different number of students, and modernizing the formula so that it takes into account some of the differences that the districts are dealing with. But we also need to stabilize it so that year over year, there aren't these wild swings. And then you, as you've stated, leads to some of these shutdowns and these real difficulties in our schools. But I'd also say that I'm very concerned right now we're not spending taxpayer dollars where we would want to spend them in education. And so we have these administrative costs. In fact, we often say, you probably heard during the campaign, we have more municipalities than California, and we have more school districts than municipalities. And much of the money is going to these administrative systems, sometimes not even running K through 12 school systems, buildings that are antiquated and really hard to keep up to date and really costly. Instead, as governor, I want to make sure we're putting money into our students, into our teachers, and into our, the buildings we need for education. I also am going to address third grade reading. That is a key inflection point, and too many students across our state are not reading at grade level. And I'm going to do that, I'm going to help with phonics-based reading. That is what helps most students learn to read better. We're not using that right now. So we're going to put money, continue to support the funding for teachers to get that education, as well as ensure high-intensity tutoring, which I've worked on in the House and now worked with people in the state to do. So we continue to get our students back on track from any learning loss they're still experiencing. And then finally, addressing the mental health crisis with more mental health resources in our schools and passing the Kids Online Safety Act.
The other part of the school funding formula, which I mean, you know as well as I do, I don't know many people who don't think that it's not broken, because I mean, we've been talking about this for years, but of course it's so closely tied to property taxes, highest in the nation property taxes. So how can you address the school funding formula while addressing property taxes at the same time, not keeping those from rising even more? Because every governor I've lost track at this point of how many years and administrations has said they want to address both, especially property taxes. And let's face it, they've only been able to do so much. They haven't been able to truly bring them down.
You know, this is really frustrating too, because some of the school districts have actually gotten a bit of a windfall with the new funding when the funding formula is fully funded, and yet those taxes haven't gone down. So the state puts more and more money into schools, and yet somehow the property taxes of the municipalities don't go down. So I think what we have to do is really make sure people are aware of where their money is being spent. As far as property taxes, it's largely schools, and it's largely the state health benefits plan. And so the school systems, that's why I say we've got to share services better. We can't have all of these administrative
Nobody wants
fees.
to give up home rule, though.
But I think when you look at the administration, I'm not saying you start with giving up any schools. I think we do need to look at the numbers of students around the state and help educate people as to whether or not they think it still makes sense to run a full school system. But you certainly can look at the administrative cost and say, okay, administratively, we want money going to our students, but you also have to address that state health benefits plan. It is going up 20, 30% a year. It's in a death spiral. It's not going to deliver for us. And so that's why I'll put an independent auditor in there, make sure that we are clawing back the money that's not coming back into the states and to the municipalities, hundreds of millions of dollars, so that we can start to address that state health benefits plan and drive down costs there as well.
Congresswoman, we have to take another quick break. We'll be right back. More with Congresswoman Mikie Sherrill on Ask the Candidate. You're watching Ask the Candidate here on News 12 New Jersey. I'm Eric Lanskroner, along with Congresswoman Mikie Sherrill, the Democratic gubernatorial candidate. We thank you so much for staying with us, and we're continuing to take your questions, but we want to remind you how to get those questions into us right now. You can call us at 888-NEWS-12NJ, 888-639-7126, and of course, you can also post a question to our Facebook, X, or Instagram accounts, and we look forward to taking more of your questions. We do have a call right now from Mary in Morristown. Mary, thanks for calling in. What's your question?
Yes, I'm in lead with the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network. Will you support legislation to permanently close the loophole in New Jersey in the Smoke-Free Act to protect personnel who work in the casinos as well as patrons?
So I'm supporting people who work in the casinos and hotels having a safe working environment and making sure that we can continue to support the businesses down in Atlantic City and don't lose any jobs. So
would you then promote going completely smoke-free in the casinos? I know that obviously there's been some of the casino owners and operators have questioned whether or not doing so would drive people to neighboring states.
Right, and I'd want to understand that a little bit better, because I don't want anyone to lose their job, but I certainly don't think anyone should worry about whether or not their health is at stake. So I think we should come up with a plan for how we get to this smoke-free environment, but I want to make sure I better understand the jobs there and how that's going to impact them.
Congresswoman, let's move on to another question right now. This one is from Michelle on social media, and Michelle wrote in and said, you made some very serious accusations bordering on defamatory in regards to Jack Ciattarelli and him being the reason for tens of thousands of people dying from opioids. When is your campaign releasing the proof you said existed last night? And just to kind of piggyback on that, just before you got here, a release came out that the Ciattarelli campaign is filing a defamation suit against you personally over this. Can you respond to that?
Certainly. I think it was pretty obvious that what I was talking about was the fact that Jack Ciattarelli owned a company that printed the propaganda of some of the opioid companies that were the worst offenders. One of them paid over $4 billion in fees and fines because of the misinformation and the propaganda they were putting out, saying that opioids were safe. Now, this was in about 2016. This is at a time when Hillbilly Elegy was out, when we knew the devastation of the opioid crisis, when I was working at the U.S. Attorney's Office to shut down some of the pill pushers, people that were over-prescribing opioids, so that we could end the addiction we were seeing throughout our state. And yet Jack was actually printing information that these opioids were safe, that people could, to get people to keep taking them. And then after that, that wasn't enough. He actually worked with one of these opioid companies to develop an app to coach people through how to get their doctor to give them more opioids, to coach them on just how to get access to that. And this at a time when we knew how dangerous they were. And this was some of the worst companies. So I think Jack made millions of dollars. He often says he is just a small business owner, but he doesn't ever go into his business. Well, this is it. This is how he made his millions. It wasn't very small. He made millions of dollars. The opioid companies made billions of dollars. And this was at a time when thousands of New Jerseyans were dying in the opioid crisis.
Jack's camp was very quickly to pounce on this, said that it was a sign of desperation on your part, that you have accused him of killing tens of thousands of people, and in a statement said, in a time where political violence and violent rhetoric are becoming all too prevalent, Mikie Sherrill baselessly and recklessly accusing a political opponent of mass murder in a televised debate crosses the line. Clearly, this has been getting more and more ugly over the past couple of weeks, to say the least.
Yeah, I think what's really striking there is Jack has still not addressed anything about this company he ran. He's still not addressed that app he was paid to develop, because instead he's trying to divert from any accountability. And this is a pretty typical play of Jack Ciattarelli.
Do you regret the way you said what you said, though?
I think it was pretty clear, the context of which I said. I think anybody listening to it would understand that.
Okay, let's get to our next question. I believe this one is from Zach, right? Is that correct? Zach wants to know, can you see what her views are on medical marijuana and recreational? Also, does she have any plan to legalize home grow? Is it just for medical or for everyone?
So I'd like to see home grow legalized, but what I'm more focused on is fixing the regulations that we have in place now. We need to do more with what's going on in the industry. We have a real problem with THC products that are unregulated, that are available on shelves to anyone, really, in 7-Elevens. That's been something I've been hearing about often as I go around the state, a really concerning thing. I'm a mom of 4 kids, so you can imagine how concerning I find that. We also, I think, are seeing some of the safety and the precautions we'd like to see, and the understanding of what the packaging is and how it's being sold not in place in a way. And most of the legislators who put the initial legislation in place feel it needs updating. And I'd like to get to work on that right away so that we can have a safe cannabis industry here. And I would like to see home grow rules and moving and allowing people to do that.
Congresswoman, in a recent interview, you were asked what grade you would give Governor Murphy. You gave him a B. I don't need to tell you, you did it. As my father would sometimes ask me, though, growing up, he would say, well, why not an A? That was always the standard go-to. What do you think that you would do better? Where do you think the governor fell short?
There are a couple of areas. One of them is just making Trenton work better for people. Ensuring that we're cutting through the red tape and permitting, that we're holding people accountable to save time and money for constituents. I was speaking to a woman who was trying to open a restaurant, who was saying it took her 8 months. She's paying rent the whole time on this space. She's bleeding money. And this was an individual. She didn't have a team or a fleet of lawyers to do all the paperwork. Her permit was disapproved twice. I think it was on the 3rd time she was actually able to get permitted. And paid hundreds of dollars at each tranche and never was told what the problem was. So I'm going to beef up the Business Action Center. I'm going to make sure that you can get help, that you can hear what's wrong with your permit and get assistance. I'm going to cut down on these fees so that you're not paying through the nose just to open up a small business. And I'm also going to ensure that we're driving in power to our electric grid so we can drive down those utility costs. And finally, I'm going to address the housing shortage. We really need to beef up that first-time home buyers program so that individuals can get into that first-time home. And we also need to take on the landlords who are colluding so we can drive down rental prices.
We have another call, actually. Let's go to Kerry in Manchester. Kerry, thanks for calling in. What's your question?
Hi. Yes, I'm calling in regard to the affordability in New Jersey and how it is impacting companion animals and the families that can't afford to live in New Jersey, can't afford the food, and now can't afford their pets. And that is ending up with a huge cost to the municipalities also. I was wondering if elected governor, if you would commit to opening a dialogue with the advocates and the municipalities and law enforcement on how to fix this problem.
And are you talking affordability in general, or with respect to companion?
I think she just hung up. So I'm not 100% on that one. Just looking here. Yeah. Oh, she's back. Okay. You still there, Kerry? Apologies. We lost her right there. So from the part of that question that you were able to assess,
sure.
What's your response?
So with respect to affordability, this is the number one thing I hear. I hear from thousands and thousands of New Jerseyans, and it is just becoming too expensive to live here. And that is based both on the things I'm talking about, the reform that it needs to just afford to stay here, to afford a house here, to afford to rent here, to afford to ride public transportation, and driving down the cost in Trenton. But it's also all of the attacks we're seeing on our economy from Donald Trump. So the tariffs, which are raising the price on everything from a cup of coffee in the morning to groceries you buy in the afternoon to the dinner you're getting at night. Everywhere you go, costs are going up. The one big beautiful bill, which people know are going to have huge healthcare implications, huge costs on the energy grid and energy production, as well as the fact that Trump is continuing to attack us with doing things like freezing money for the Gateway Tunnel, which could be a huge cost. So again and again and again, we see both a need for a governor to take on Trenton, which I'll do, and a need to push back against tariffs. So on day one, freezing rate hikes to save you on your electricity bills, taking on the landlords who are colluding to drive down your housing costs, taking on the PBMs. Those are those middlemen in the drug market who drive up prescription drugs up to 10 times. I'll drive down your healthcare costs by taking them on. So driving down all your costs here and taking on Trump in Washington.
We have to take a quick break, but I do want to talk a little bit more about President Trump when we come back here on Ask the Candidate.
Thanks.
Welcome back to Ask the Candidate here on News 12 New Jersey. I'm Eric Lance, Colonel, along with Congresswoman Mikie Sherrill. Congresswoman, I want to get back to something we were talking about just a few moments ago, because you were speaking about affordability. It's a recurring theme in the show, but you were also talking about affordable health care and fighting President Trump as well. But let's start by talking about healthcare costs, because Pfizer just reached a landmark deal with the Trump administration to bring down prescription drug costs for U.S. patients. And now other pharmaceuticals are apparently clamoring to make a deal as well. What is your plan to bring down prescription costs, and do you approve of what you're seeing right now with what just happened with Pfizer?
Well, I am happy to hear that drug costs might be coming down for consumers, so I would love to see that. And I think what we also have to do is take on the PBMs. Those are the middlemen. They set up different markets, and it's really interesting because I've started to notice it now as they've consolidated. So your independent pharmacies are being shoved out of the market because they're not making any money. CVS owns PBMs, so they'll charge independent pharmacies, they'll charge tons of money, and all of that can go to the whole CVS conglomerate, but the independent pharmacies get cut out. So if you see sometimes you get a note saying, oh, your prescription or you won't get covered if you go to this thing. That's not always true. I've had my independent pharmacy call me and say, no, you'll get covered, but they just say it because they're trying to direct you over there. You may go to CVS and not get the prescription you want. They say, oh, they're out. Some of us have had the ordeal of going from CVS. They keep calling, say, oh, it's at this CVS, this one. They're not carrying it because it's not making them any money. So they're really driving up prices and giving worse service.
Numerous times in the show already and throughout your campaign, you have been very vocally anti-Trump. Much of your campaign and much of your messages are anti-Trump, going against what the president is doing. You said you want to fight back against what the president is trying to implement in certain respects. How would you work with him, though, if elected as governor?
Well, I hope we can get to work on the Gateway Tunnel project. I really would like to see him unfreeze those funds, because this is the biggest project of national significance we've seen. It, as I said, could be responsible for almost 100,000 jobs. It impacts the commute into the city. I'd love to see federal funding for infrastructure across the state. I'd also love to see federal funding to update our water system. We have some old pipes that really need to be fixed. We've seen water main breaks across the state. We were just talking about it last night. I'd love to see a lot more federal funding come in to replace some of these old lines. I'd also like to have, if the federal government, if Trump is not going to run the Department of Education, Title I funding, if he's not going to run some of the healthcare systems that that the federal government has historically run, I'd like to work with him to have all that money come back to New Jersey so we can run it ourselves. But I think instead what we're largely seeing is a tariff regime where he's enriching himself and his family. I think they've made about $5 billion so far, much of it through foreign governments putting cryptocurrency into their accounts. And people across my state are now paying tons of money. I was talking to Chuck, who owns a coffee store. He was saying a bag of coffee beans went from about $2.50 to about $6.50 or $7. He's going to have to pass on those costs to people. You see it in grocery stores. You see it every time you go on Amazon. All of this is raising costs on people, and that's when I talk about how we're going to fight back. That's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to join the lawsuit on tariffs right away as governor.
All right, we're actually running out of time, but we want to get to a phone call right now from Debbie in North Brunswick. Debbie, thanks for calling in. What's your question?
Good evening. First of all, Congresswoman, I'd like to thank you for your service.
Oh, thank you.
I was a Navy wife during Vietnam.
Thank you.
My concern is that you're throwing support at Zoran Mandami in New York, who we've heard is a socialist. And if you're governor of New Jersey, would you be using any of his socialist policies here in the state?
So I've not endorsed Mamdani. I'm staying out of the New York race. I actually have been focused on lowering costs for New Jersey. I do want to thank you so much for your service, because we always say in the military, when someone serves, the whole family serves. And I think during that period of time, during Vietnam, that had to be really difficult. So thank you so much. But no, I'm not a socialist, and I don't anticipate utilizing and becoming a socialist. But thank you. Thanks so much for your service.
All right, Congresswoman, we have to take another quick break. We'll be right back with more of Ask the Candidate.
Discover the secrets hiding in the shadows on News 12's new series, Haunted Tri-State. We unearth the history, unravel urban myths, and explore paranormal encounters in our area.
Is the man down here down? So he's here.
Each episode will leave you questioning what's real and what's lurking in the dark. Haunted Tri-State. Watch if you dare. Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m.
The fall is a great time to plan an East End getaway.
Discover the people, places, and activities that make Long Island's East End a must-visit destination this fall. From farm stand finds and autumn festivals to cozy wineries and waterfront dining. Explore it all this fall on the East End. Saturday and Sunday at 9:30 a.m. only on...
Welcome back to Ask the Candidate here on News 12. We have a little bit more time for some more questions for the Congresswoman. Congresswoman Evan asked this question. He says, and this has to do with the sales tax. This is a topic that you and Jack Ciattarelli have sparred about. Evan wants to know, why do you continue running the commercial proclaiming that Jack Ciattarelli will raise the sales tax to 10% when the full video shows that's not what he said? It seems very disingenuous. And in fact, in your first debate, Jack Ciattarelli said that he would not be raising the sales tax, and you did not commit.
So I've said I won't be raising the sales tax. Jack has brought this up for many years. In fact, the most recent time he brought it up was September 4th, that he would be raising, or he would be putting other state sales tax programs that raise the sales tax by 10% on the table. And then when he gets challenged on it, he said, oh, no, he wouldn't do it. But then he brings it up again. And he's raised taxes for years on people. So he voted to raise taxes at every level of government that he served in. He's voted against over $1 billion in property tax relief for people here in the state. And he continues to promote different items that would raise it. And his math never quite works out. He says he's going to cut the budget by 30%, and then he's going to actually raise it when he promises everything by 8%. So again and again, he says he's going to do things, then walks it back, then says he's going to do things, then walks it back. But this is something he's been proposing for many years, looking at and putting on the table the other states' property tax system. So this is something I think that he's intending to do. He says he's very adamant about the fact that he has not said that. He said a lot of things I don't think are true. We have another call right now, Congresswoman. Again, time is running out. We have Paul from Long Branch on the line. This is going along with the affordability in the state. Paul, what's your question?
What is her plan for COLA? In all the debates she took part in, she said she was going to reinstate it. And I just want to know what her plan is, because there's been no COLA in the state in 15 years.
Thank you. So the question was about reinstating COLA? Yeah. I was just with the firefighters earlier. Several firefighters groups endorsed me earlier today, and I spoke directly about this. We had a roundtable months ago to get the Social Security fixed for firefighters, which I was able to do federally, and now we have to take on COLA. It has not been raised in years. Some firefighters have been retired for about 20 years and haven't seen a raise in COLA recently, and with all the interest rates going up, that's unacceptable. So I'm working to fully fund the pensions so we can get them solvent and start to take on the COLA for those, starting with those who are most in need, so who've been retired longest, and then continue to build it out from there.
All right, Congresswoman, we're pretty much out of time. I just want to give you a chance to share some final thoughts with us today.
You know, it has been wonderful to talk to you today. I always love having a chance to hear from the people of New Jersey. I promised you that should you vote for me as governor, I'd be incredibly honored, and I will continue to work hard for you and for your families to drive down your costs and make sure New Jersey continues to be a home for everyone.
And Congresswoman, just the way we've spent the past hour fielding questions for you. Next week, on October 16th at 8 p.m., your opponent, Republican Jack Ciattarelli, will be right here in studio, sitting where you're sitting right now, answering questions as well from our viewers. So we encourage all of our viewers at home to please be as adamant and aggressive at sending in your questions as you were for today's show. We do appreciate it, and of course we apologize if we did not get to all of your questions. We know we didn't, actually. Congresswoman Mikie Sherrill, thank you again for being here in the studio. And we thank you for watching our News 12 New Jersey special, Ask the Candidate. We'll see you again next time.